So welcome everybody. Welcome to the Daily Intimacy. It's Tuesday. It's Wednesday in Australia, but it's Tuesday here in the US. um, it's August 18th. And we are going to begin with a brief centering and then dive into our most interesting topic today and introduce you to my friend Katrina, who I haven't seen in a long time, and I'm so happy to see you. All right, so I just invite everybody to have a breath and gently close your eyes. Yeah, and let's begin with a couple of cleansing breaths this morning, sort of shake out the sleep or anything that's happened thus far this morning. Yeah. And when I say cleansing breaths, I invite you to really focus on the exhale as we begin. Just kind of cleaning out the cobwebs from sleep or any energy that you woke up with this morning that hasn't been quite aligned yet with light and love. That can happen. It happened to me this morning. Woke up feeling grumpy. Yeah, and any micro movements that you feel to make, like just a little stretch in the shoulders, yeah, a little roll of your head, maybe your wrists, maybe for me, like lower back and pelvis. So just any kind of wiggling and just kind of, again, getting out any of the cobwebs that need to be released so that you can come into a grounded, connected space for yourself, filled with love and light, which is why we're here. And now I'm going to invite you to focus on the inhale. Coming to stillness, keeping your eyes closed if it feels comfortable to continue focusing on yourself and what's happening inside. I invite you to inhale, focusing on the inhale, breathing in the energy up from the earth. Breathing in the love and the light that exists, that's available to you in every moment. All you have to do is pause, become still, and tune into that energy. Know that it's love and light and that it's pure and that it's available to you in all moments. And focusing on the inhale is, for me, an easy way for me to receive. So breathing in and just letting all of that sweet sunshine bathe your whole body, bringing that energy into all your cells. From your toes all the way up to your heart and then the top of your head. And just notice that that's something that you can, if you remember, you can do in any moment that you're feeling down and out or tired or just grumpy. When things are down around a 3, 4, 5, that you have access to this loving energy all the time. Yeah, it's hard to remember to pause and slow down and breathe when we're overstimulated and grumpy. Yes. Practice. So with that, I invite you to have a really, really nice deep breath. Maybe hold the breath for a moment at the top of the inhale and then exhale. Yeah. Great. Okay. Thanks everybody for being here. Katrina and I met at an ISTA retreat. Is that okay to say that? I guess it is. It is now. We met at a week-long tantra retreat that we both did in Western Mass in 2014 in October of 2014. It was, for me, such a powerful week. Like, it was so amazing, and really, really strong healing around divine masculine and divine feminine internal work. And Katrina and I were roommates along with some others,
In
and
bunk beds.
bunk beds. Yeah, right. And yeah, I just was attracted to your energy right away. You're so beautiful and just energetically beautiful is what I mean. Just exuding love and light. And I recognize that. And I'm just so happy to have you here. I mean, you've been doing, like we said on the pre-call, a zillion things since then, a zillion changes. And I love the topic. When I asked you to meditate on what to bring, it's like, okay, bring it. Math and the orgasmic state, quantum physics and the orgasmic state. I'm ready.
That's
So I'm going to
awesome.
turn it over to you.
Thanks, Robyn. I'm so glad to
Yeah.
be here. I love Robyn. It's so awesome when you go to these things and all of a sudden you meet someone and you're like, oh, hi, best friend. You know,
Right.
we could just be friends forever now.
It's true.
So I'm so happy to be here. Um, I've attended Zoom calls, but I've never been a speaker. So if I'm doing something wrong, just tell me, or if you can't hear me or something. So um, I have a huge, I originally was a math student. I have a math degree. So that was actually my original training. I was a computer programmer. And then I married a farmer a million years ago. And I moved to the middle of nowhere and I had babies and I milked cows and I had this exceptionally grounding experience being a farmer for a long time. And partway through there, I became sick and I had breast lumps. And my mom had just died of breast cancer. And this is when my first teacher appeared in my life. And his name's Jim. And I ended up having a miraculous healing. And this is when I first started delving into quantum physics, because the physical world, we tend to look at everything through Newtonian physics, the sort of things that we can see and touch and hold. And if I take a ball and I drop it, gravity makes it hit the ground. But these kinds of physics don't actually map the human experience, not the real human experience. Like it maps what my hair happens if I cut, what happens if I cut my hair, but it doesn't map our health. And my interest in Tantra came later within my marriage when I realized that as humans, we were capable of so much more. We were capable of so much deeper intimacy. Sexually, we were capable of so much more. And according to the world, I had a great marriage and great sex and great everything. Like according to Cosmopolitan, we were like 98th percentile, you know. But I knew there was more. And weirdly enough, it relates to Tantra. And I think Tantra actually literally came to me one night. I was lying in bed, maybe 15 years ago. And I knew that there was something I was seeking and it wasn't out there. And there was no internet, there was no Google, there was nothing like that. And the word Tantra literally bubbled up inside of me. And I had to go to my local library and ask the little old ladies behind the desk if they had any books on Tantra. And I lived in this tiny conservative town. And they literally looked at me like, right. And then they ordered all these books in. And so I had this stack of books. And they literally were like, you know, they were still stamping books then because like I'm 100 years old or something. And they were stamping the books looking at me like, you know, because it was all about all these kinky moon rituals and having sex with 40 people at a time and all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't think this is what I'm looking for. There is something so much bigger. And then eventually I started finding the real spiritual path and the heart-centered path and the path that I believe actually maps what we are as humans. And that's where the quantum physics comes in for me. My teacher, 20 plus years ago, Jim, he used to say, he didn't ever talk about quantum physics, but he would just say, I don't understand humans. He's like, why do you go around thinking about stressful things all day long? He says, you can literally walk around in an orgasmic state 24/7. I don't understand what you're doing. And at the time, I had no idea what he was talking about, right? Because we imagine orgasm to be this kind of like ejaculatory insanity, and that people are all walking around like like orgasm guy from Saturday Night Live, like. And I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And then much later, like many years later, I began studying Tantra. And the beautiful thing is, at the time, my husband had no interest in it. He was just like, well, actually, he took it personally. He was like, oh, so you're saying I suck in bed? That's actually what happened. But the great thing is, it made me go deeper into the spiritual aspects of things, what it really meant to be tantric, to actually live in the world in this way. And then, of course, that just extends into the bedroom. That just extends into our relationships. When we actually live in a way that we're so much more than these physical bodies, we're so much greater, then we're the same thing in our relationships, and we're the same in intimacy. And so, of course, our sexual lives expand in the same way. A few years later, I had a huge revelation during intimacy, like literally one of those like seventh chakra white light experiences. And Tantra, as a whole, came to me. And I began teaching. And one of the greatest challenges of teaching Tantra is we're taught to look for techniques and things to do. Tell me what to do to experience a 3-hour orgasm. Tell me what to do to become tantric. And unfortunately, that's not how it works, right? So Tantra becomes this unlearning of all the things that limit us. It's almost like within, we are these expansive divine beings. But we've got all these programs and restrictions and ideas and beliefs and personalities and all these attachments that limit that. We think it feels safe and strong and good to know, well, I'm Katrina, and I have a degree in this, and this is what I do, and this is my relationship status, and we think that this feels good. But it's actually in releasing all that we actually become all that we are. But that's really hard to teach, right? And so a lot of people come to Tantra and they say, okay, I've heard about these like orgasmic states where you just, these pictures of yogis and energy flowing up, and we're like, I want this ecstasy. I want this bliss. I want to make love for hours and not know, all this stuff, which is awesome and real. But how do you teach it? So I do teach it. I teach courses. I teach online courses. I write books. But it's always this strange, vague promise that says, if you can release your personality, if you can undo all the damage that was done as a child, if you can, get over all this stuff, then one day you may have this expansive orgasmic experience. It's such a crappy promise, right? Because it's just, that's no fun. So then one day, recently, I watched this movie all about the life and ideas of David Bohm, who was a quantum physicist back in the time of Oppenheimer and Einstein and Second World War time. And I watched this movie a couple months ago, and I just, it was like, I don't know, with everything going on in the world, all the separation, all the challenges, all the massive shifts we're going through, it was literally the perfect medicine for me. So within quantum physics and how this all fits into becoming orgasmic. I was really tickled when this came to me. I'll just tell you that, because that's why when Robyn says, what do you want to talk about? I'm like, I want to talk about quantum physics and orgasms. This is really exciting to me. So I'm going to talk about this one experiment in quantum physics. And just tell me if this doesn't make any sense, because literally my sister, who I'm staying with right now, said to me one day, she said, Katrina, no one knows what you're talking about. Just so you know, you know it, but no one knows what you're talking about. So just, if you don't, just go, Katrina, back up, because, you know, okay. So 100 years ago, they did this experiment where they called it the double slit experiment. So imagine a wall and there's two holes in it. And you take a flashlight and you shine the light through the slits. So at this point, they assume that everything in the world is matter, right? If you take a ball and you throw the ball hits the wall. It's just matter. So essentially, they imagine the light particles were like little balls. So they shine the light through the holes, but instead of acting like balls that should have just gone right through the hole, it expanded like a wave. You know, like if you drop a pebble in water and it creates this wave pattern, this is what the light did. It was like they shone the flashlight and then the light went out. And the physicist went, well, that's weird. Like, that's not what a particle would do. Why would it act like that? So they decided that light was a wave. It wasn't a particle, it was actually a wave. 100 years later, they redo the experiment because they got better science, and they realized they can send a single electron through at the wall. So it can't be a wave, right? It's a single electron, it's a thing. They send this towards the wall, and again, it spans out in this wave pattern. And they're like, well, that's weird. So they decide to measure it, and they put a little measuring apparatus beside the hole, one of the holes. And they thought, well, we're going to measure this and see what happens. And as soon as they put the measuring apparatus there, it acted like a particle. And it went through like a ball. It was no longer acting like a wave. And they were like, so then they took the measuring apparatus away, and it went back to being a wave. And this was the beginning of why in science now they do double-blind experiments, because they realize that the effect of the observer changes the experiment. So for whatever reason, the way my mind works, I'm like learning about this double slit experiment, and I instantly start thinking about sex. Because, you know, welcome to my mind. So the wild thing about this is it's a lot like this in intimacy, or even in life. I mean, but we'll start with intimacy because that's funnier. In intimacy, when we get hyper-focused on anything, our bodies and our experience become like particles. It just becomes like a thing, a singular experience. It's like when if you want to be intimate with someone and you say, okay, here's my goal, here's what I want to do. I want to ejaculate, I want to do this, I want to do whatever the thing is, or I want to pleasure you, or I want to, I don't know, play out something I've seen in the past or a fantasy I have or something. The experience will stay very physical and very singular and very earthly. But as soon as we stop watching, as soon as we take away the observer, as soon as we take away that mechanism, we act like a wave. We act like an entire universe. And then we just flow within that experience. So the key is to remove the observer, which is so much why in Tantra, it really is a spiritual path. It's a spiritual path where we meditate and we learn to find this center. We learn to release all of our personality. We learn to release our fears. We learn to release everything that restricts us, because all those restrictions are what sort of inform the observer of what we're supposed to be experiencing. And this is sort of the foundation of what I want to talk about. Well, it's actually the big point, and I can talk about more things. But that, to me, is the number one thing, even in Tantra. So my teacher, for example, how does he walk around in this orgasmic state? Right? Well, the observer isn't present. He's just walking around experiencing life. He's not worrying about this and worrying about that and trying to appear this way or trying to make you think this or any of those things. He's just living. Oh, look, there's a bird. Oh, look, there's my wife. Oh, look, isn't this great? I'm kind of hungry. And then we experience life in this literal, like a child, or I'm staying with my sister right now. I was telling Robyn 2 years ago, I gave away everything I own and I now live in a backpack. And I've been traveling for the last 2 years. Right now I'm back in Canada for obvious reasons, but I'm back in Canada. And so I'm living with my sister right now, and she has 3 dogs. And so I'll sit and I'll watch the dogs. And of course, the dogs have no sense of self. They're just like, oh, look, a stick. Oh, look, now I'm playing. Oh, look, now there's a bird. They're just, and I was sitting the other day watching them thinking, imagine living from a place of zero personality, like zero sense of self. It's like this ultimate freedom, like actually getting to just exist. And it doesn't matter what you look like or how people perceive you or what you accomplish or anything. You just get to live. And this is what I believe the ancient tantrikas and yogis were trying to teach us, that let all that stuff go. Like, you're not going to disappear. It's just live. And yeah. So I have another topic I'd love to dive into, but if you guys have any questions.
Yeah, before you do that, let's have questions.
Yeah.
I had to get a wasp out of my bedroom, so it was interesting timing for that. Yeah, I see Andrew's got a bunch of comments and a lot of energy for this topic, as I expected.
I can certainly say something. It's one of those experiences where everything just falls together, right? So I've followed David Bohm for a long time. He ties into a lot of the different systems that I'm interested in, and ran into his film, as you did, a few months ago. They've been working on that for years. David Pete passed away back in 2016, 2017, and he was one of the main instigators for it. He was a co-author of Bohm's. Anyway, I could go on and on, but I did think that I hadn't seen, and I'm not sure Bohm saw. I don't know if you found it, but this idea of removing the observer in both quantum physics and spirituality, because all the work he did with Krishnamurti and everything else, I'm not sure. Maybe he did. I guess he must have, because he did spend a lot of time on the double slit experiment. But have you found anything in his writings?
I don't think he actually did talk about removing the observer. He was more interested in the, so what I took away from it was, as I walk through the world right now and I make observations about what's happening in the world, that I can't remove the fact that I am observing this. Like my perceptions of what's going on in the world or my relationships or my life, to remove myself and believe that on some level that I'm being completely objective is wrong.
Right.
And that was what I took mostly from David Bohm, was we can never remove ourselves from our observations, because the observer is actually altering what we observe. So I don't remember him ever going so far as to removing the observer.
I don't think he did. I mean, this is the last step in seeking, right? Is realizing that the seeker has to go away as well.
Yeah.
So it's yeah. So anyway, thank you.
Thanks.
Sins, did you want to add anything? I know you put something in the chat. No, okay. Paradox, yeah. Anybody have any questions? Like, Katrina just said a lot of things, and it could be that somebody wants to hear it again. Like, summary, like, can you say that piece again? I didn't quite grasp it.
Doug? I think Doug has a question.
Oh, great. Go ahead, Doug.
You were talking about removing the observer, and I understand part of that.
Right, Doug, I can't hear you. Can you speak a little closer?
I'm sorry. So I understand part of what you mean by removing the observer, but I guess what I experienced is sort of like really dropping, the thought and the rationalizations and kind of being in a really open state. But then but then being aware in some way, just like sort of being aware of what comes to you, what experiences come to you. And so is that like an observer? I mean, that's kind of observing in a way, but it may be in a different way. And I don't know. I don't know.
So I may not fully understand your question, but so for me, Tantra is the foundation of Tantra is the merging of the physical world and the divine.
Yeah.
Right? We tend to think, oh, well, I only want to be divine and my whole life is connecting with God, and
Yeah.
money, sex, relationships, that's all evil and just distracting me from my path. Other people are 100% down here going, oh my God, maybe once in a while I'll burn incense and maybe I'll feel better, but they're sort of all down here. And Tantra says, no, this informs this and this informs this. And the idea is to actually be this fully divine, expansive, infinite, wondrous human here in this personality. It's the merging of the singularity and the duality that actually brings the magic. So it's not about me not being Katrina at all. Like, this incarnation matters. For whatever reason, I came here like this. So on some level, I think fully embracing exactly as we came in is a huge part of it. I think maybe the thing is, and maybe the reason I focus on that is that we're so unaccustomed to actually also releasing all of it at the same time. Like, we have this duality idea that it's one or the other. So you're right. Like, it isn't, we don't. So here's the other part. I tend to tangent, so it's just how we go. Squirrel. But so even in intimacy, in the beginning, you are 100% present, right? Like, even in masculine feminine dynamics, which is really a huge passion for me right now. When we are in that full masculine feminine dynamic, we are fully present, right? We are getting pleasure, we have desire, we are connecting, we are touching, we are doing this. And this continues while the connection becomes stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And then eventually these two things come together and you merge and all disappears.
Yeah.
Bodies disappear, the physical aspect, everything disappears. And now, to me, it feels like a wormhole. Like, you just sort of merge and you just like, poof, right?
But aren't you sort of, the body disappears, but aren't you sort of like aware of the energy? Isn't that part of it? Like, sort of a curious awareness of the energy?
For me, when I go poof, if I try to become aware of it,
yeah,
I'm snapped back into
yeah.
Like, the discipline is actually to stay in the wave, like to actually release it and go, just trust, like, don't worry about it, like, you'll come back soon enough. just let it flow. And so that's one experience of that for me, that because even in life, right, like, you can, I mean, sex is certainly the most poignant to talk about, but it's in all things. It's, people talk about meditating, it's like, okay, I'm meditating and feeling bliss, and the minute our brain kicks in and goes, I did it, we're out, right? It doesn't, it's actually the thrill and the release of staying in that timeless space that's the magic. And I'm not even sure our language can describe it well enough. Right? And so, but I do agree, because they talk about you have to have strengthened your ego before you can transcend it. Right? It's not just about saying, I don't matter. It's like, we do matter. Every single one of us, in all of our uniqueness, is perfectly awesome. Like, we're all these lovely cogs in the whole thing. That, so, okay, can I talk about another quantum physics thing that kind of tickles me? So, one of the things David Bohm was really interested in was, he called it the Russian experiment. And because he was really interested in communism at the time, or Marxism, it was just around the Second World War. he got in a lot of trouble for that, unfortunately, but he was very interested in this. So my physics part, I'm just going to talk about it like a layperson because I actually am not a physicist. So there's 4 kinds of elements in the world, like there's gases, solids, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so he discovered this other one called plasma. And plasma is basically, so I'm all talking about orgasms, so I have no physics brain in my head, so I'm just going to make this up for a minute. Basically, within this plasma, it's like a charged plasma within metal. But anyway, what he found was when these electrons came together, the more they combined, the freer they were. And the way and again, my language isn't right because my brain is totally off in this other space. But what he basically found was that the more the electrons participated in the collective, the freer they were from the whole. The Russian experiment that he was talking about at the time within the communist idea, and again, this is the communism in its purest sense, right? Was that the more we participate in the whole, the freer we are. We have this idea that if we're in a collective, we must be sort of the same, right? That we become mono, similar, empty. And we see this in the spiritual world a lot, right? That we all just want to become pure energy and then we can join, right? This idea that it's only in that purest space we have to release everything else, all of our differences, so that we can completely merge as one. But what David Bohm found was the more connected we are in the collective, the freer we are. And my interpretation of that is the more completely we express who we are, our truth, how we really are, right? The more we connect into the world, the more we connect into the community, and the freer we are to do it, which seems counterintuitive, right? We feel like, well, if I want to have a lot of friends, I have to get rid of some of the parts of me that are quirky and odd. But the truth is, the more we are ourselves, the more, I don't know, if we're all perfect crystals, the more we are that crystal, when everything fits together, we actually have more freedom. I don't know if that makes any sense. The science, I went completely sideways on it, and this is where I think it's really this and question, right? Or this and answer that says, somehow, if we are completely, perfectly ourselves, in our absolute truth, we will actually fit into the whole greater. It's like someone posted on Facebook a while ago, they said, if you start being yourself, watch your friend group shrink. And I commented on it because I said, but only initially. And then your friend group will grow. I have a gazillion friends. Like, I just have a zillion friends everywhere. I make friends. I had someone visit me yesterday who was like the reflexologist at my dentist office because she's awesome, right? And I find that the more I am just me, like unabashedly me, without any, I don't know, I fit better. And it's easy to merge with people. It's easy to just drop everything and go, hey, let's do something. It's strange and counterintuitive that the more we are ourselves, the more we actually fit, even though it's like I used to have this idea that we had to be puzzle pieces and we had to be the perfect puzzle piece to fit, and then it worked. So I had to change myself to fit these other people or whatever. And now I'm realizing maybe we're like organic, amazing creatures like this. And when we come together perfectly, we just do perfect things together. I don't know. But there's something magical to me about fully embracing who we are. And then we merge, like, yeah, this is me babbling from my consciousness now. So if you guys have any questions, that's totally cool.
I'd love to hear not only questions, but anything anybody wants to say to add to that or reflect on. I mean, this last piece of being ourselves and, merging with the universe, God, and each other. when we're truly ourselves. And Vlad said, I feel like this year is forcing us all to become who we truly are. Absolutely, 100%. I agree with that.
Avril?
Oh,
Yeah.
hi. I have a quick
Great.
question about the observer. Is that in kind of actually our ego, or when our ego steps in? Is that what you're talking about? With trying to make sure the observer is not present? And how we interact and how we're present with people?
Yeah, the ego. So the ego has a lot of different definitions. So for me, in the purest sense, our ego can simply be my definition of self. Like it's almost my third chakra, who I am, which makes me different from you, which is perfect, right? There's nothing wrong with my sense of I, right? I think in the world, the ego gets twisted when we create almost an attachment to that ego. When I say, well, I want people to think this about me, I want this to happen, this defines my ego. It's almost these external things that define us as self. So let's say you're with someone, even forgetting about sex, even having an interaction with someone, you're having an argument. Ego gets in the way as soon as ego says, well, they can't talk to you like that. Well, that's not right. They weren't even listening. What are they thinking? Oh, we're not even listening, right? There's like almost this other aspect of self that's like present and going, can you believe they're doing this? And da, 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 da. If we were present, there is no ego. There is no other sense. You're there, but you're just listening, right? So I guess, yeah, you're right. Ego would be a good way to say it. Ego is just a funny word, and it's used in a lot of ways that I don't agree with. So hence because I actually think there is a healthy ego. I think there's a healthy sense of self. There's a healthy owning of our gifts and our challenges and our shadows and our incarnation. But most of the time, if we speak from this external space and we say, because the truth is, if you and I are talking, the difference between speaking as adults with a whole pile of history and gravy and issues coming forward, it's almost like all the issues are battling, as opposed to dropping all of that and just being like two kids who just met in the sandbox and said, hey, you know, it's a whole more peaceful, loving, whole way to meet. I hope that answers your question.
We've got a question.
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Oh, good. Great. Thanks, April. We've got a question in the chat from Brad, I believe. Can you see it, Katrina? Do you want me to read it?
Sorry, I haven't been watching the chat. Maybe. Oh, if there's any starter practices recommended to move in this direction, meditations practices.
Brad, do you want to say more?
No, I mean, I've done a variety of meditations. A lot of this sounds like Zen that I've practiced a little bit, but I wonder if there are like 2 or 3 practices just that you found helpful to get started.
So for me, all practices have to really be part of life. Because everybody here, I'm assuming, can meditate sitting on a cushion, you know, like to actually sit and breathe and all that. Like that's, and that's really important in terms of healing. Like to sit in meditation, to sit through guided meditations, to really allow parts of us to heal that are hurting. But once we understand that, it's to walk out into the world and really experience it in the world. So for example, a practice for me is to walk down the street, even right now, with all the different opinions and different perceptions of what's happening in the world, and release the observer. Like in real life, no matter what we're observing, to actually look at people and go, we are all just humans. We are all just little 4-year-old kids walking down the street, unsure what we're doing, like to really come into that humble, loving space and practice it in the world. Practice it with our family, practice it with people 24/7. And even to watch ourselves, to go, ooh, the observer jumped in there. And sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes it's important to say, wow, why am I really focusing on that? That's weird. Let's let that go. And it can be anything. And for me, the thing that comes to me the most is kindness. And it's something that's sort of, I believe when I wrote a book called Tantric Intimacy. And what I realized is the very first section was all about love. And it was redefining what we understand love to be. And if we look at love as actually being what connects us, what connects human beings, the foundation of that is what the Greeks called agape. And agape is just, it's like human connection, even with people we don't know. It's kind of that we truly are all in this together. These are all the humans. There's no judgment. There's no anything. It's just looking at another human and going, you know what? I respect your journey. Whatever you're going through, I trust that if I was in your shoes, I would be doing the exact same thing. And this is agape. And when we practice that, how can we be anything but kind? Right? Because if someone is hurting, if someone is rebelling, if someone is, it's easy to point fingers right now. But if someone is going through that, then they must be hurting. And all we can do is love. And to me, this is the greatest practice right now, is to find human connection always through this love. Because one of the other things that I love about David Bohm is he said that everything, we all come out of this unified field. Even whether you look at, we're simply made of atoms. And whether it's the atom of this wall or the atom of my body or the atom of the dog, everything comes out of the same building blocks. And his idea was that we are constantly enfolding or folding out of that, he called it the implicate order, and then folding back in. And we are in this constant flux, in and out and in and out. But every single one of us comes out of that same unified field. And any idea of fragmentation, any idea of separation from each other is wrong. It's actually incorrect, and it causes neuroses. It causes pain and chaos and suffering. And I believe in this time to really embrace that we really are, we are all just coming out of something. That to me is the greatest practice right now, is really feeling connection with every single soul on the planet. And yeah.
Yeah, it's a great follow-up question to this, Katrina, that Jason asked. How do you manage to keep healthy boundaries when you're in that agape kind of love?
Well, I think the foundation is still truth, right? That in this time right now, and always, but right now in this world, we are being squeezed and the heat is up, but we must, like, you have to ask yourself what truth means to you, right? And this again is this divine physical connection. That to me, truth is, as humans, we really are divine and physical, which means that our guidance comes from within. And that is what truth is. Truth is the inner whisperings of what our personal path is. So if you're with someone, you can love them and embrace whatever they're going through. But that doesn't dictate your behavior. If your truth says, and now you need to walk away, then you need to walk away. But don't add a story to it. Don't say, well, I don't believe it, don't add any story to it, because all you know, the thing about divine truth, the thing about divine guidance is we don't know why. That's the annoying part, right? If we stay in our brain, in our ego, if in our personality, we say, okay, well, here's what I believe, and here's what here's how I live my life, and here's how I blah, blah, blah. And this is why we don't fit. That's not divine. That's not infinite. That's not connected. That's just our brain feeling good about itself, right? But to actually sit with, I remember when I was sick, so 20 plus years ago when I had the breast lumps. So I was very attached to my brain. I was very attached to my mind, that I really believed that I knew the answers and I could argue anyone into a corner about anything. And what my teacher taught me is you have got to shut your brain off and listen within and trust, which to me felt like a runner having his legs cut off, because I believed my brain was my greatest asset. And the most challenging thing of that journey was listening within meant if someone said, why are you doing that? I have to look at them and say, I don't know. That's just what I'm called to do. And I realized that anything I said to them was a lie, because I knew what my truth was. And then if you ask me why, I'm going to look at you and consider who you are, and I'm going to tell you a story that's going to make sense to you. And if someone else asks me why, I'm going to tell them a story that makes sense to them. But all I really know is I'm meant to go this way. It's kind of that, just enough light for the step I'm on, that all I get to know is this, and this is the real walk of faith, or the whole integration of, our infinite expansive selves. I remember I know we're probably like, relate, but when my kids were little, my kids are in their 20s now. And when they were 2 and 4 when I got sick. And of course, I really was having to deeply connect inside, because I was really afraid of dying. All the women in my family died of breast cancer. So I was only 29 when I got sick, and I was the oldest woman in my family at that time. So it was a scary time, and in scary times we listen differently. So when it was all over, I had a miraculous healing. I wrote a book about it called What If You Could Skip the Cancer? And here I have these little children, these 2 and a 4-year-old, and I'm staring at them going, how could I ever guide you? Like, I am so lost in this world myself. So they joke now, they're old now, but that I never punished them. I would just take them to the couch, because anything, they could be fighting about a ball that one stole from the other, or they could be fighting about, or my son was bullied in school or whatever. And I would take them to the couch and I would stare at them. And I'd be like, because I had no idea what to do. I was so overwhelmed with, how can I ever help these little karmic creatures? And then something would come, some answer, some story, something, and I would speak it, and a miracle would happen. Like, we would literally get through it, sort it out. And now I trust this completely. Like, I have no other way of living, which I think helps me just follow that truth and still love everybody. And I'm not saying it's always easy, especially not right now. It's not easy right now. But I really do trust that truth. And if that little voice says, go this way, then I just have to do it. So.
So beautiful, Katrina. I love that story about your kids. That is just so right on. I love it. I wish I heard that.
They used to say to their friends,
years ago.
Their friends would come over and they'd be all upset, and they'd go, shh, she's going to take you to the couch and she's going to talk to you and cry.
Right. Oh, it's so funny. Oh my goodness. We do have another, I have sort of closure in a minute or two, but if anybody wants to say anything, have a minute or two for people. If anybody wants to please put me in the chat so we know. or if you have a question that can be answered briefly. Matthew says, I suspect that not every one of our thoughts is truth, even if the thought repeats. When does our thought become truth? Yeah, well, that's the distinction there. Do you want to speak to that, Katrina?
It's funny, right? When I remember reading a book once called something like Our Inner Gremlins or something, and they had this idea that inside our head was this board of directors filled with gremlins who all had different opinions. One was the commandant, you know, and every time something happened, they would like tell you you're a loser and what are you thinking? And then another person was like, no, you have to be nice. And there were all these voices in our head, right? And this became the question, right? Which one is truth, right? There's so many voices. There's so many thoughts. Which one do you listen to? And I think this is really our personal journey of meditation, of really trying to hear which one is truth. It's the path of every mystic. It's the path of all these people, is how do I hear the voice of God? How do I hear my divine truth in this sea of thought? So for me, within this board of directors sitting in my head who like to argue, truth, and I don't know why it looks like this, but truth is this guy, and he's sitting in the corner on like a kid's chair, like his knees are up like this. I don't know why. And there's all these adults in the room and they're all debating and they're going back and forth. But there's this guy in the corner kind of sitting down on this kid's chair. And I'll ask a question. So you sit in meditation. And I do this. That's probably when I meditate the most, is when my thoughts are swirling and I don't know which one is truth. And I sit and I ask the question. And this voice in the corner says one thing. And it lands. This is how I feel it. It just lands as truth. Then all the other thoughts start to swirl. Oh no, that can't be it. And this and da, 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 da. And what I always know about this guy in the corner is he never argues. He just sits there. And then I go back to him and I go, no, really, but what's the answer? And he says, go left. Like it's just, there's only one truth and it's so still and quiet. The other thing that I just want to add to that, which is completely different, but that's just how I discern truth. I was listening to this incredible speaker through the David Bohm Society on Sunday on a Zoom meeting. And he was talking about the difference between thinking, thought, and thoughting, which I think is awesome. So basically, thinking is current. I'm thinking right now. I'm in the moment, I'm thinking about something right now. The process of that thinking creates a thought. And that thought then sort of gets logged in our mind. The challenge is a lot of the times we think we're thinking, we're actually thoughting. We're actually just repeating thoughts that were developed by a previous time of thinking. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like our mind is actually tricking us by bringing these previous thoughts into the present, repeating them, circling them, and making us think that we're actually currently thinking, but we're actually thoughting. I love that so much. Because my brain is filled with thoughts, but I'm not present at all. I'm actually just repeating an old story, pretending that it applies to this current moment. So you're 100% right. It's hard to discern between our thoughts and truth and stuff, but spirituality has always been important to me. When I was young, my grandfather was a minister, and when I was a teenager, I was, studying everything under the planet, and I was very, very interested in spirituality. I remember one time my grandpa, when I was 14 and a teenager, and I used to, when you grow up sort of inside the church like that, you hear about all the politics and all the awful stuff that happens inside the church. So one time I looked at my grandpa, maybe I was 16, and I said, why did you ever become a minister? This life sucks. Like, this is a horrible existence. Like, why would you do this to you and your grandma and to grandma and my dad? And he looked at me. So he was, it would have been sometime just before the First World War. And all he wanted to do was be a fighter pilot. So here's this dude who wants to be a fighter pilot, like the coolest job in the whole world, right? And he said, here I was, this is what I want to do. And all of a sudden I heard a call and I had to become a minister. And so then I went on with my life and I went to study mathematics and philosophy and life and marriage and blah, blah, blah. And so you go through all kinds of agnostic, atheist, intellectual periods of that time. But throughout all of that, there was always this little thread inside of me that said, but who called Grandpa? What in the world could call a man away from becoming a fighter pilot in the coolest time to be a fighter pilot? Something called Grandpa. And for me, this became my perpetual state of constantly trying to listen for that voice, listening to that connection, which again, to me, is the foundation of Tantra. It's the foundation of yoga. It's the full connection with, because we are divine. We are so much more than this. And when we tap into that, it's like listening to the truth. I mean, this is where my life gets really entertaining. I know it's time to go.
We have to end. I'm sorry. I could listen to you for another hour, but I actually personally need to close up at 10. So I'm sorry to interrupt you.
All good.
Yeah, thank you. And sometimes people will stay after. And so, I mean, if you want to stay after for a couple minutes and have people ask questions or whatever, you guys are welcome to do that for sure. But I just want to thank you so much. This was rich and beautiful and angelic and deep at the same time. It's like both for me, which is, I think, is the thing I love about you. And I'm going to send you the chat because there's been so many wonderful comments, and I know you haven't been like monitoring it and looking at it. So I want you to see some of the things people have written and shared. Thank you everybody for being here. I'll send out the recording. I'll send out Katrina's contact info. And next week we have some really interesting topic. Dear friend Leora Tech is coming, and she created her work. It's her. She kind of stumbled upon, I'm going to say, her work life purpose, studying the history of Poland through her life as the daughter of a Holocaust survivor. And but what she studies in Poland and where she brings people to Poland to experience over the last few years has been how non-Jewish Poles have commemorated the Jewish life in Poland. And so she has this business called Bridge to Poland, and she's going to bring her story and her experience and inviting us to tap into our own lineage and ancestry and sort of weaving it together. So I'm really excited for another rich and deep topic next week. So I hope you'll all join us. And yeah, just blessings to all of you, and hope you all have a beautiful day. And thank you again, Katrina. So beautiful. Reach out to Katrina if you want to hear more. And I'll see you soon. Have a blessed day, everybody.
Thanks so much, Robyn.
So welcome.
Yeah, if you guys have questions, I'm happy to chat for a bit longer.
Please finish your story.
Oh, what was I talking about? Wow, I totally lost it. Do you remember what I was talking about?
What the calling of your grandfather?
Oh,
And you trying to find out where that came from.
yeah. It's funny because even I continued to study religion in school and out of school, and it was always the mystics that interested me the most because that's what they wanted to do, is hear that inner call. But I think maybe I finished the story. Maybe that was it. But oh, I know. I think that's when you know, we talk about like life being miraculous and you never know how things are going to turn out. I think when I really stopped thinking I had to understand everything and I actually could just listen and I would trust that voice and I would just act, things just happened that I could never have fathomed. Like real miracles. Like my kids would literally say, oh yeah, well, that's normal. That's mom's world. That's just what always happens in mom's world. And it's almost like you have that happen a couple times and you almost don't even want to go into your brain. You actually would rather see what happens. Like it's kind of a, no, this feels true. Okay, I'll do it. And life becomes amazing. You know, it's even in relationships. Like I'll sit in a conversation with someone. You know, I had a friend like through this COVID thing. We have really, really different opinions of it, what's going on. And a little bit of a Facebook war broke out. And not on my side, but she got really mad. And we've been friends for 30 years. And we're very different. She's an absolute atheist. Like we are nothing but bumbling neurons, worm food. When we die, that's it. And I, of course, am not. So we really came to on this. So I kind of was curious if our friendship was over because it got kind of nasty. And then a few days ago, so I just let it go. Like I'm not much of a fighter. And then a few days ago, this little voice in my head said, call her. And I was like, oh, I don't want to call her. It's not going to be a nice conversation. But the voice was, call her. And it won't let me go. Like whatever it is, it's like, this is what you're going to do. And I called her and we had a lovely chat. And the conversation didn't go anywhere it didn't need to go. And everything's fine. But the timing was right. The spirit was right. She was going through a really hard time when that all happened. And I trust that completely. So. Do you guys have any other questions or thoughts? Hey, Karen.
Hey, I'm Emily.
Hey, Emily.
I just picked up a book about breaking the habit of being yourself. Have you heard of it? By Dr. Joe Dispenza. And the first chapter is The Quantum You.
Oh.
So I think that's very funny that we're talking about quantum physics. And I'm just like at the point where I'm just absorbing everything right now. So it's good to hear it like on a sexual side and about like, I really loved how you're talking about you have to be the free, like part of the collective to be free. I'm just really feeling that right now in my life. Because I was in a job that was the total wrong path and I was getting sick and all this stuff. And like my period was never regular until I like answered my calling and I'm like, I got to do this thing. And now it's like very regular and like, I'm feeling better. It's just crazy. It's so cool. I just love all this stuff. But I just happened upon Tantra during quarantine. So like my new religion.
Well, and it's an interesting time, like what we're living in right now. And I think it's expanding us into a totally different way of seeing the world. Like
yeah.
It's really asking for a redefinition on all counts. And it's all very personal. Like every single person is having a very different experience. And it's really important. There's no, those people out there need to figure this out. It's like, no, it's every one of us is really, but again, it's releasing all these things that aren't us. All the people who are in jobs they hate or relationships that are unhealthy or all these things are like, nothing like that's going to survive this. Like we will emerge who we actually are. And I say that lightly, but It's
Feels like the collective is part of it. Like we're all of a sudden becoming like a global energetic. It's like the global energetic field. I mean, there's a lot of sorrow and sadness in it, but there's a lot of hope and potentiality and letting go of sort of individual boundaries. I have so much hope for this time that we're going into. I mean, it's going to be difficult. I feel there's going to be could be lots of bumps in the road. You know, but on the whole, I just feel like it's this amazing transformational time that we all came here for this time, that we you know, made a soul pact. You know, that's how I feel. I made a soul pact. I'll have to speak for myself to be here for this amazing, momentous time, you know, especially those of us who went through the 60s, you know, it's like, that's where we, you know, we knew we were going to change the world, we felt. And it feels like, you know, it feels like I'm back to that place.
You would love a book. Carrie, our friend Carrie here, he sent me a book saying, you know, you would really love this book, and it's called Earth Rising. And it's a channeled book by a woman in Australia. And it's all about this time and the time coming in 2030. And it literally, she wrote down what I knew in my deepest soul, but couldn't put into words, and has brought so much peace in my heart about everything that's happening right now, to the point that I messaged her and said, can I make an audiobook for you of your book? Because, so I've written 3 books, and they're all in audio and everything. And so I've asked her if I can create her book into an audiobook, because I think it's so important and so powerful right now. And to be able to sit and listen to it, I think would be so valuable. And she said yes. So I'm actually beginning recording the book right after our call today. And wow. I am just so excited. So it's called Earth Rising. Her name is Rhiannon Hines, and it's just the most beautiful book about why we're going through everything we're going through right now, on a global level, on an individual level. And
well, I love that it's Earth Rising as a title, because I just keep seeing this beautiful garden. I just see a garden.
Oh, and even the graphics on the book it was an important book, so I'm very thankful to my friend.
Thank you for that. That's wonderful. Thanks so much.
Yeah, beautiful.
I'm trying to understand the path that you either you went on or you suggest others could go on. And I'm not sure if that path is to reach Tantra or to reach peace with everyone, but it sounds like a big step is meditation and spirituality. And I don't know how to deal with that step. So it sort of makes me feel like this is a hopeless venture.
Because the spirituality part is...
Because I have no understanding or connection to spirituality.
Are there moments in your life that you can't explain?
A hard question I'd have to think about.
My teacher, Jim, used to teach something called reference points. Sorry, my brain. And he said a lot of the challenges is we define ourselves by the physical world. We define ourselves by, this was my job, this is what I do, this is what's happening. But these are all changing all the time, which makes life very scary, because the things that we define ourselves by are constantly changing. He said there are things, experiences in our lives that we can have as reference points that never change. So for me, as a mother, when my children were sleeping, I would go and stand by their door, and the whole world would stop. And it hooked me into something beyond time and space. It hooked me into something else. Or it could be a moment when you first meet someone, or watching a sunset, or just moments in time that we feel something else. And those moments are the seeds that we grow from. In my book, Tantric Intimacy, I tell a story about my dad. So my dad is this great big intellectual guy. He was a vice principal of a high school, very linear thinking. And when he was in his 20s, he was a tour bus driver in the Rockies out in Western Canada. And one day, he was bringing the bus along this ridge, and there were two people on the bus. And he was heading down the hill, and when the hill goes down, and then it went around a corner across a bridge. And the bridge was only wide enough for one car, or let alone a bus. And so the bus was coming down the hill, and he realized that he had no brakes. The bus was malfunctioning. And as he was coming down, all he kept thinking was, oh my God, I hope there's no one coming back across that bridge. And he went down and he turned the corner, and sure enough, there was another tour bus coming this way on the bridge. You know, and what do? Right? And so he just went down and he darted towards the bus. And he just, whatever we do in that moment, and the bus was coming at him, and all of a sudden, the buses were doing this. And they went on their way. He went back to the garage, and the people came running out, and they were like, what the hell happened on the bridge? And my dad said, I don't know. He says, the other bus driver just came back, white as a ghost, sweating, didn't know what to do with himself. And Dad was like, I don't know. And to this day, my dad's 86 years old. If he tells this story, he starts to cry. And there are these miracles that happen in the world all the time that our logical mind says, well, it's just an anomaly. It's just a fluke. It's not real. But the reality is, if we want to have an actual complete picture of the universe, we have to include every experience in the universe. And that includes this bus happening. It includes the miracles that happen all the time. And you know, I think those are the places where we begin. You know, when we really sit quietly and say, what are the things in my life that just didn't make sense?
Thank you.
Just to piggyback on that, I mean, just the idea that we're sitting here and thinking and that there's consciousness is just such a miracle. I mean, it really is. If you would sort of step back and you go, oh my God, I'm thinking, I'm breathing, I have skin. It's just like such a miracle.
Yes. Well, thank you guys so much for joining today. This has been so awesome.
Thank you. This was just so amazing.
Thanks, Katrina.
Check your books out. Definitely your own books and this other book, Earth Rising. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a lovely day, everyone.
That's the thing.
Thanks. Thanks, Katrina. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Carrie. Have a nice evening.
Yeah, have a nice day.
Yeah,
A wonderful
yeah.
day. Thank you.